Diablo, as a franchise, is known for its villains. It's right there in the name, Diablo. But this has never been more apparent than in the third and most popular entry, Diablo 3. Expansions added New Game Plus content, Adventure Mode added bounties to the boss's heads. Seasons even went so far as to add leaderboards and deadlines. With all this boss killing, we have to wonder, is Diablo himself really the most worthy of his titular spot? Hi, I'm Kifinosi from One Up Binge, and today I'll be ranking Diablo 3 bosses from weak to powerful. For this video, we'll be taking the bosses from Adventure Mode and ordering them, beginning with the weakest and ending with the most powerful. We'll be ranking exclusively the bosses that are featured on the Bounty Map's boss display. Sorry, Iskatu. We're doing this because we feel Adventure Mode does a better job balancing bosses past max level. This means no one will be at an advantage nor disadvantage for the level you might be at when encountering them naturally in campaign mode. We'll be looking at the boss's attacks, their weaknesses, their minions, and even their lairs. We will not, however, be considering the lore related to the bosses in question. Though some lore may be provided for context, we're looking at this purely from a mechanics standpoint and our experiences on the field of battle. With all that said, hone your weapons, socket any legendary gems you might have, and let's get to the list. Taking our spot for weakest boss is the Skeleton King. Does anyone else remember getting home from the midnight release party of Diablo 3 and thinking this fight was such a challenge before any of the patches or expansions? No? Just Demon Hunters? Well, while balancing may have been an issue way back at the base game's release, the Skeleton King has become somewhat of a joke encounter at this point. Found in the royal crypts of Act 1, the skeletal remains of King Leoric reanimate to serve as a glorified tutorial for what you can expect of these fights. His attacks deal a fair amount of damage, but are slow. He can summon an impressive amount of returned to aid him, but they're also quite slow. Where he does have brief moments where he's off-screen, they're not the long lapses of invulnerability that are taken by other bosses, even within this act. It's a fun fight, but far from intimidating. Coming immediately after him is Rakanoth. We actually forget sometimes that Rakanoth is considered a boss. Not only is he out of the way, lurking around in the Library of Fate, but he doesn't even put up much of a fight. He summons some demons, but we honestly think they're less impressive than the ones you have to fight on the way to get to him. His attacks deal decent damage for straight-up melee attacks, but that's about it. With weak reinforcements and no life-threatening abilities, Rakanoth flies under the radar for a lot of players. That's just not going to cut it in Act 4, even for a sub-boss. Up next is Queen Araña. If looks counted for anything, she'd be much higher on our list. Any arachnophobic players may have a tough time even reaching her lair. Since we're just looking at the fight, however, we have to admit this one is not so challenging. Unless you can one-shot her, she will automatically retreat with a lowered health bar, sending reinforcements to wear you down for a while instead. This can certainly be a difficulty if your build relies heavily on any skills requiring cooldowns, because it does break up the battle. The brood daughters that she sends to fight you are unlikely to be enough to actually harm you too badly in her absence, though. The biggest risk here is resource management if you're playing a class like Monk, who recovers their spirit slowly. All this can draw out a fight, but not do much to threaten, really. Following very closely is our next spot, Cassadia. We almost put her on the same level with Queen Araña because the two bosses are regrettably similar to fight. They're both spider women who take periodic breaks to let smaller spiders give you a chance to recharge. We do, however, think that the Maiden of Lust is a little more powerful, if only for her attacks. While her spider minions may not be as hard-hitting as Araña's, she is able to spawn many more of them. One of her main attacks, in fact, is opening areas in the ground for spiders to pour out of, which can deal constant, draining damage to the players. Cassadia has earned herself a more powerful rank, even if the two fights are similar in terms of mechanics. Up next is Izul. He ranks above our arachnid women for no other reason than he scales with heavier damage. Izul offers a middle-of-the-road fight with his demonic reinforcements in Act 4. His melee attacks are nothing too much to worry about on their own. The most challenging or annoying part of this battle is actually his freezing abilities. The fact that he's able to slow you down so much is a good way of prolonging the fight, even if he isn't likely to win it. He's definitely most difficult for the slower damage dealers in the game, such as Crusaders, because the biggest risk is becoming overwhelmed by his summoned help. Then we have the mage, Zoltan Kulle. The hardest part about this boss fight is triggering it if you find yourself in campaign mode. There are a lot of things about this battle that may appear scary at a glance, such as the two replenishing Eternal Guardians that guard Kulle for a high DPS minion fight. There's also the fact that Kulle is a caster. This means he can do things like blast you with high damage fire orbs, conjure up tornadoes to avoid on the map, and even manipulate time in certain areas to slow down your character. In terms of mechanics, the fight is interesting, but not challenging. The Guardians are pretty easy to outrun, and Cool has a less than impressive health bar. The fight may prove more grueling for slower classes such as Barbarians, but they would have the advantage of standing their ground when it comes to the Eternal Guardians. Up next, we have Magda. Lore-wise, she's definitely one of the more interesting and powerful manipulators in the game. She directly involves herself in the main plot of the story, and there's a lot of build-up to bringing her down. This is a fight that's much harder in campaign mode than in adventure mode, however. This is not to say that the numbers don't scale at all, but Magda's deadly insect attacks are very reliant on you having low defenses. By the time you're maxed out, this fight gets a lot more survivable. Still, if you are playing a caster class, such as a wizard or witch doctor, you're gonna be absorbing a lot of those insect attacks because they are homing. She can instantaneously summon a lot of reprobate vessels, which hulk out and look intimidating, but are ultimately of little consequence. We think it's worth noting how she is more dangerous than her minions, which is awesome. Just above her is Vidian. It makes sense that the Lord of Envy would have plenty to be envious of in terms of power, doesn't it? Now, while the Sanctum of Blood may be the coolest boss slayer in the game, it's not particularly dangerous. The same could be said of Vidian. He does conjure some of the most powerful and versatile minions in the game, including Blood Vermin and Vidian's favorites, who can overwhelm the player in combination with one another. Conjuring images of himself to attack you may also look intimidating, but it's not much of a threat when he deals such low damage to you. This is a fight that could easily be deadly without some method of crowd control, but we hope that by level 70, that's something you've figured out for emergencies, even if you're playing a class with fewer options. Now we move on to Gorn. This is a fight where it's easy to become overwhelmed. While Gorn's melee attacks, consisting of bites from his stomach, don't deal much damage, the other present dangers can quickly chip away at your health. Not only do the green orbs of goo become sentient acid slimes and start dealing damage to your feet, the poison fumes in the room can quickly make the entirety of the larder feel unsafe. That being said, since both Gorn's attacks and his minions' attacks feel weak, we just don't think he can go up any higher on our list. If you have good crowd control, good resistances, or decent health regeneration, it'll balance out a lot of the damage from this fight. Hopefully you have at least one of those things. More powerful than him, we have the Butcher. This is where we get into some more dynamic fights. The Butcher has some pretty nasty melee hits that make standing next to him dangerous. Long-range fighters are not spared, however, as his hook attack can leave you stunned and vulnerable, within melee range, no less. He has good hands-on attacks for virtually every class as a result of this, and the damage can quickly scale into something pretty nasty at high levels. Without a high defense, being one-shot is not out of the question, especially around Torment 6 or higher. It will be just you and him in his Chamber of Suffering, which means he's not so intimidating on the minion front, but the Chamber of Suffering might be the most challenging and mechanically difficult layer in the entire game. The floor will light sections on fire, which can not only deal damage to you directly, but can also herd you towards some melee attacks you might not want to take. With a decently sized health bar, this is a fight that actually scales to be surprisingly difficult for an Act 1 boss. Not to mention, he's one of the favorite returning bosses for longtime fans of the franchise. Then, there is Urzael. Urzael is one of the most irritating bosses to fight, and his flamethrower absolutely makes him deadly. If there was ever a boss who wanted to one-shot, it would be Urzael. That's because, if you don't take him down with one hit, he'll automatically become stunned halfway through the fight. It's not that he gets a free attack in while you're stunned, because that would straight up be unfair. It's just that the break in your rhythm can be hard to recover from quickly in a battle that has mostly been about dodging and perfectly timed attacks. Not only do you need to be wary of avoiding his flame attacks and AoEs, you also need to be dodging falling debris as the field of battle crumbles around you, so yeah, timing is everything in this one. And that's a skill set that only comes with practice, not gear. That makes for this being one of the more skill-based fights, and Urzael is one of the more challenging bosses. Now we, unfortunately, have to talk about Siegebreaker Assault Beast. This one was hard to rank because we think the battle is much easier when playing classes with primarily ranged attacks. The Siegebreaker has a lot of powerful melee attacks that can be administered, but his ranged options are fairly limited. In fact, the scariest thing he can do at range is rely on the demon spawners at the edges of an absolutely massive map. If you have to stand next to him to fight, you will be vulnerable to his stomping, his lines of fire, and periodically being grabbed up by him. That last one is particularly annoying because you cannot attack him while restrained in his massive hands. While this is one of the more challenging fights for classes such as the Crusader, Monk, or Barbarian, Wizards and Demon Hunters are likely to find him less intimidating. Up next is a boss who's challenging to everyone, Adria. We were actually super impressed by just how powerful Adria was. Of course, if you've played through campaign mode, you know that Adria has always been powerful and full of surprises. We just really think that they did justice to her with the intensity of her battle. Not only are her attacks ferocious, but she drops pools of arcane damage onto the ground. Unless you go out of your way to acquire resistance to it, this is one of the most fatal kinds of damage to most classes. Her resistances are decent and well-rounded, and in the second half of the fight there are little blood bubbles that burst to add extra damage-dealing pools onto the floor. Nowhere is safe to step in the Great Hall, and Adria will be coming for you quickly. And speaking of unsafe areas, we move on now to Azmodan. The Lord of Sin is absolutely not joking around. This boss battle can be intense. One of the massive homing fireballs he hurls at you could be enough to easily bring you low on health. The minions he summons are actually demon gates, which will spawn their own Azmodan minions to attack you if you don't take care of them. It's an interesting contrast to the majority of Diablo 3 bosses, where you want to generally avoid anything they summon until the big bad is dropped. There's also a widening pool of black ooze closing in on you from all sides of the arena as the fight progresses, adding a bit of claustrophobia and challenging players with long-range attacks. Even when the environment closes, you will have to stay on the move, lest you take bludgeoning damage from the corpses Azmodan summons to rain down on you. The one saving grace is that despite being quite the large and intimidating entity, Azmodan doesn't have that much health. If you keep your focus on him and get that bar down before too many secondary dangers arrive, you may just be alright. Maybe. In our third most powerful slot, we actually have Diablo. While he may have been the most difficult boss of the game that kicked off the franchise, things have gotten more difficult since then, and Diablo only ranks as the third most powerful. That being said, he is an admirable foe and a very satisfying conclusion to the original base game. It's quite the battle. Diablo has a massive health pool. He can imprison your character, his attacks wield nasty damage, and his defenses are great. There's also a whole second fight with him in the Shadow Realm right smack dab in the middle of the first fight. A really interesting mechanic to this battle is that the minions that Diablo summons are actually just shadow versions of the character you're playing, complete with abilities from the class's skill tree. The lore has definitely touted him up to be the most impressive evil of them all, but we have two bosses who might just beg to differ. Taking our second most powerful slot is Malthael. It makes sense, doesn't it? When the Reaper of Souls expansion brought in Act 5, it would only stand to reason that they needed to up the ante with a bigger threat than what had existed in the core game. Malthael is a force to be reckoned with. His health bar is admirable, but his attacks are deadly. The hand scythes he wields offer one of the better straight weapon attacks of any of the bosses. His spinning blades attack, though, that's known to be outright deadly. If you take one of those while you're cornered by one of the poison clouds in the heart of the fortress, you will almost definitely be dead. And all this before the mid-fight cutscene. Unlike with some other end-of-act bosses, Malthael does not get healed during his cutscene. He only unleashes more powerful attacks. It's for this reason, and this reason alone, we've ranked one final boss above him. And on that note, our ranking for most powerful boss in Diablo 3 goes to Belial. We've elected the Lord of Lies himself as the most dangerous boss to fight in this game. Not only is this a difficult and grueling fight when you get to it in campaign mode, but it actually scales up to be harder in adventure mode once you've reached max level. Admittedly, it starts out pretty easy, where you fight a group of veiled sentinels, a deceptively weak minion portion of the experience, though even this section can be hard if you're saving a big AoE attack for the boss to arrive, because there are a couple of ways of these demonic guards that must be slain first. When Belial does initially come into the fight, it does not seem so terrible, though he has both melee and range attacks that are decent. They're not so bad in comparison to what we've seen from other bosses on the list. Fighters who rely on distance may have a tougher time because of Belial's speed, but even the glass cannons are likely to be okay. At first. What elevates him to the very top spot is his Phase 2. The screen will shift into a more 3D layout and you'll have to fight Belial's true form. This comes with a larger health bar that is completely filled and some of the nastiest attacks to dodge in a rather narrow arena. Slower classes will have a tough time dodging his powerful fists, which could potentially one-shot a player with weaker defenses, even at level 70. You have to be constantly on the move as you attack as well, because even the platform you're on will erupt with green explosions of power once Belial gets cut down to half health. He is a powerful foe, and you're unlikely to have made it through this fight unscathed your first 100 tries or so. Well, that's been it, everyone. Our rankings for Diablo 3 bosses ranked from weak to powerful. What boss do you dread seeing on the bounty list? Let us know in the comments below, along with what other games you'd like to see covered. While you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye!